Welcome to our program on leadership theories and principles, and the program is entitled Leaders Now and Then. I'm your host, Greg Cole, professor at Southwestern College in Winfield, Kansas. We're pleased to be in the presence today of one of our very own native Kansans, a bright mind, a great scholar, president and CEO of the Kansas Leadership Center, and co-author of the soon-to-be critically acclaimed book, For the Common Good, Redefining Civic Leadership. Ed, welcome to the program.
Thank you,
It's
Greg.
good to see you again.
Thanks, good to be here.
Ed, I just want to talk to you a little bit today about if you could give us some insight on just a little bit of your background and what KLC is all about. That would certainly be a great way for us to start the program.
Well, sure, Greg. Well, quickly about the Kansas Leadership Center, we are charged with building the leadership capacity of Kansans. We work throughout Kansas trying to build the capacity of people to exercise more leadership. We've been around for about 7 years now. My background prior to starting the Leadership Center was in government and politics. I was a member of the state legislature. I was an aide to our former governor, Governor Bill Graves. That's a bit about my background, but for the last 7 years, been here building the capacity, trying to build the capacity of people in the state to lead more effectively.
Why statewide? What generated the interest to go statewide? And then more importantly, national. There were a few months ago where you had a 60-person contingent that came in from all around the world. I know they were from Mexico, Japan, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and about 10 other states here in the United States. They came to visit Kansas, particularly the Kansas Leadership Center, for what? What was that goal?
Well, it really starts with the vision that the Kansas Health Foundation had many years ago. They fund the Kansas Leadership Center. Our resources come from them. And their vision years ago was that Kansans should have access to the highest quality leadership training you could find anywhere. That's why we think of ourselves as a statewide entity, because our funder, who had the vision, thought of it that way. Well, that idea, that belief that everybody in a state should have access to high-quality leadership training is an attractive idea. And I think that's why those people came from far and wide, from all those countries you mentioned, plus a number of others in a bunch of states, to spend a number of days with us trying to figure out how to create something similar back in Nigeria, back in Thailand, back in Japan, back in Utah and Nebraska and whatnot. I think the idea resonates with people. They crave more people in their communities, in their organizations, in their states, in their regions, in their countries, exercising more leadership.
Great. And Ed, one of the things we talked about earlier, and you and I both have studied the likes of Cotter and Kellerman and Burns, and now, of course, Chris Lipp and yourself. We often hear the term leaders are born and not nurtured. What's your stand on that? What's your opinion on leaders being born versus nurtured? Because it seems to be the buzz question now out there in the leadership arena.
Yeah, I think it is a buzz question. That feels right to me, Greg. We believe that anyone can lead anytime, anywhere. And time and time again, that's proven true to me, that people come out of the woodwork to exercise leadership when their purpose is strong enough and their passion is strong enough. And maybe some people are born with more certain types of skills that help them exercise leadership, but everybody can learn those skills. And everybody has it in them. I just think it has to be nurtured, perhaps more in some than others. But anyone can do it anytime, anywhere.
In your book, you mentioned leadership being an activity as opposed to a position. Expound on that a little more, if you will.
We think too many people, not just everyday people, but also people in the leadership literature, conflate leadership and authority. They make them seem like they're the same thing. So that the leader is the person who has the big job. The leader is the person with the title behind their name. We think that's wrong. We think authority is really critical. You need authority structures. You need to have organizational authority in place. If you have a background in the military, you understand that better than most people do. But leadership is something different. And what we The way we think about it is that leadership is the activity of mobilizing people to make progress on really tough challenges. So, Greg, the way I would put it is the fact that I am the CEO of an organization tells you nothing about whether I ever exercise leadership. You'd have to watch me. You'd have to discern, is he mobilizing anybody to work on the toughest challenges facing that organization? The fact that I have a title after my name means nothing. The fact that I served in the legislature and had a title of state representative tells you nothing about whether I ever exercised leadership. You'd have to watch me again and see, am I mobilizing people? So that's what we mean. We think of leadership as an activity, not a position. And if people can't figure that out, if they can't make that distinction between leadership on one hand and authority on the other, our experience is they will struggle to lead. They'll struggle to lead because if they don't have an authority position, they'll feel like it's not their responsibility. And if they do have that authority position and they haven't made the distinction between leadership and authority, they'll get all messed up thinking that leadership is just about doing their management job. And that's wrong too.
Mm-hmm. And so when did you come up with the thought process of this adaptive challenges versus leadership? Tell me how does that fit into the program? Oftentimes, leaders find themselves locked into the technical aspects of leading folks, but tell me more about this adaptive challenge that you speak of in the book.
Yeah, you bet, Greg. When we began the Kansas Leadership Center, we traveled all around the state, talking to all sorts of Kansans, trying to get a sense about what the issues of the day were and about the type of leadership necessary to make progress on those issues. And as we talked to people, we began to hear people describe these deep, daunting, wicked challenges that have been around for a long time. And we began to think about some of the other leadership literature written by Ron Heifetz and Marty Linsky. And you know Marty, you've met him a number of times. And those two gentlemen really helped develop an understanding in us and others about this idea of adaptive challenges on one hand and technical problems on the other. And technical problems can be solved with an expert, can be solved by authority oftentimes. Adaptive challenges are trickier and they require lots of leadership from a lot of people. So we began to realize that the people we were talking to around Kansas were describing adaptive challenges, these types of challenges that have been around Kansas for a long time. Things like developing a better higher education system, things like growing the economy in the rural parts of the state, things like reducing the number of children in poverty. These are big issues that won't go away quickly and have been with us for a long time. They're adaptive challenges. We began to think that leadership is really focused on adaptive work. Technical problems can be hard and complex, but when you are exercising leadership, you're usually working on adaptive challenges.
And in the next segment, we'll talk about the competencies that were established that you mentioned in the book, and there were 4 of them. If you could, and I don't want to take too much time on that, if you could, tell me about the development of those competencies. What brought those into play?
Well, it goes back to that listening we did all around Kansas. When I started this, for a while it was just me, Greg, and I realized that I was not smart enough to figure out how to start a statewide leadership development center. There are a lot of questions we had to figure out. What is leadership? How do you teach it? Things like that. So rather than grab our favorite book off the shelf, we thought, let's ask Kansans. So we asked Kansans a lot of questions about the things that concern them the most, about the future of their state. Towards the end of those interviews and focus groups with Kansans, we would always ask the question, so what type of leadership is it going to take? How would you describe the type of leadership it's going to take to make progress on this thing that concerns you the most? And they would describe things to us that we eventually categorized into 4 areas, these 4 competencies: diagnose situation, manage self, intervene skillfully, and energize others. So that helped us develop a framework for thinking about leadership, and that's the framework we help people learn in programs today.
And we'll discuss that a little bit more with the people that we're talking to here in this audience. do want to read an insert from you on page 3 of your book here. A very, very interesting statement itself. And oh, by the way, the book is a literary masterpiece in terms of exploring leadership, and I think it should be read by anyone that's interested in the field of leadership. But in particular, you said here that leadership cannot remain the exclusive domain of those in position of authority or influence. Our understanding that adaptive work requires engaging others to make progress weaves together those two philosophies. To be effective, civic leadership must focus on mobilizing and energizing others to take up this difficult work. Tell me about mobilizing and how that applies to leadership.
I think so often people think leadership is about having the answer and leading the charge and being the one to solve the problem. What we found and what we believe is that leadership is actually about mobilizing a whole lot more people to engage in the issue, to work on the issue, to discover solutions, to implement solutions. That leadership is more about mobilizing people and less about being the one to solve the problem. So when we talk to people about our definition of leadership, we say leadership is mobilizing others to make progress on daunting challenges. That word mobilizing is critical. If you're not mobilizing others, you're not leading anything.
And finally, Ed, tell me, how did you come up with the connect, educate, and connecting, educating, and engaging others?
Well, we began to think early on that that's really what we're about here. We're about engaging people, getting more people involved in their communities and their organizations. We're about educating them on how to do that most effectively. And we're about connecting them together with one another. So it just seemed, those three things seem to really define what it is we do. And it just seemed to make sense. They're guideposts for us to think about this work as a statewide leadership center.
And you're applying leadership in all vernaculars throughout the state. And just recently, I believe I read something in terms of getting involved in the health community. Mm-hmm. How does that relate to leadership theories and principles involving the Kansas Leadership Center into the field of health?
You know, we think that the ideas of leadership, the ideas of mobilizing people around tough issues, those ideas are relevant whether you're talking in a for-profit business setting, a not-for-profit civic setting, a faith community setting. Heck, they're alive and well in your family. Mm-hmm. And so we think they apply anywhere. Lately, we found more and more people from the health field wanting to learn more. Maybe it has to do with all the array of changes going on right now related to health care in the field of public health. And that angst creates a need for more people to think about how do you mobilize people to make progress on tough things. But we're enjoying working with folks in the health field and are working with folks from so many different fields as well. It's fun for us to see the different ways in which these ideas get applied.
For all those who's listening in and those who are inspired to be in positions of leadership at some point in their careers, what would be some closing comments that you would make for those who are aspiring to be the future leaders of this great country?
You know, I think what I would encourage people to think about is that you don't have to wait. You know, leadership is an activity. It can be done by anyone at any time. And if we believe we have to wait until we are a state legislator, or we have to wait until we are a CEO, or we have to wait until we are the pastor, then we'll lose years of exercising, of the opportunity to exercise leadership. And the world around us won't benefit from our gifts as much as they could if we believed that we can mobilize others. We can step out and lead now. We think leadership is about behaviors, and these are behaviors anyone can do. And we're excited through the work that you're doing and others that hopefully more and more people are exercising more and more leadership today.
Thank you very much, Ed O Malley. We certainly appreciate it.
Likewise.
Stay tuned for the next series on Leaders Now and Then. This was Now. We'll see you then.